monthly meeting. This month, we will be going over updates and reminders, a Hancock user list and other Hancock-related updates, spending production updates, IJA updates, when our next meeting will occur, and WDR program updates as well. So for the weatherization portion, we're going to start there and then we'll roll into WDR. So for updates that have occurred since our last meeting, we did receive a 90-day no-cost time extension to DOE and our WRF. This is for grant number EE0009937. So that would be what we currently have balances with for DOE 24, WRF 22, WRF 23, and WRF 24. It is important to invoice all of those balances out as soon as possible in order for DHCD to meet the monitoring milestones for DOE. So as soon as you're able to complete those jobs and submit the invoices, please do so. This also in general helps with your cash flow, but for meeting our milestones, we do need them invoiced as soon as possible. Amendments were sent out. I think at the beginning of this week, we did have a few amendments that had not been returned and signed. So if you have not had your amendment signed, please return it. And then you'll have access to those funds again in Hancock. And if you have any balances remaining with WRF 23, there are some that showed the admin budget category still showing. So you would need to have those funds moved over to WRF program operations. So failure to do so could hold up your payment processing when it times to submit those invoices in. So if you have any admin, please submit that budget adjustment. If not, we will be reaching out for you to do so. In terms of LIHEAP spending, we're nearing the date for those final invoices. We're at the end of July right now, and final invoices for LIHEAP are Friday, September 5th, with production ending at the end of August. Either a budget reduction form or a spending plan needs to be submitted to me by this Friday. We had asked for those earlier, but there are some agencies that still have not had a chance to respond. So we are asking by this Friday to have that submitted to us. And then since our last meeting, DOE's provided us a memo and a program notice. These were released to the grantees on 7/8. You'll see that the DOE allocation is actually a little bit slightly more than the 24 funds. So in the breakdown, you'll see how much more we received within each of those category, the main annual formula funds and the WRF portion. Now that we have those allocations, we were able to update our state plan in the system page, which it's reported to. Our project officer previously had already reviewed it. So the next level of review would be the financial assistance office with DOE. And then we have to wait for that full DOE approval before grant agreements can be sent out to the subgrantees. So we do know what our funds are going to be. We've done our steps to prepare it with submitting it in page, but we do have to wait for the full approval. So hopefully we'll get those sooner than later, but we will just have to wait until we hear back from DOE. And then DOE Memorandum 144. This was resending WPN 22-10. There were only 15 grantees that were impacted by this memo. Virginia was not one of them, but we did want to share some of the program notices and memos that DOE had shared with us. We did at DHCD receive our LIHEAP 25 award letter. The 15% share for weatherization is $14,945,900.70. It is slightly lower than LIHEAP 24, but we were happy to see have our award letter so that we can start running through our allocation formula and getting that prepared for grant agreements. DSS must provide an MOA and an MOA amendment for signature before we would be able to release those funds to the network, but we are aiming for a September 1st start date. And since our last meeting, we have released an information notice in regards to managing the IJA ACPU, and I believe Tim was going to discuss this one.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. This is, where unfortunately we do need to, we need some urgency with respect to bringing down the ACPU on the IJA funds. We're about, about halfway through the grant cycle. We are elevated about 50% above the grant cycle, a little bit more, or for the ACPU, what we expect it to be. And that means we have only half the time to bring it down and need to be, approximately half of what half of the ACPU to bring it down. So we sent out this information notice that we don't know what the final ACPU will be, because that's dynamically determined through cost of living increases and inflation and some other things. So what we're approximating is about, let's say it's about 8,547, which is this year's ACPU for DOE. That would be about the midpoint of the overall IJA grant cycle. What we're saying is right now, if anything's over 9,000, we'll unsubmit the invoice. I mean, we really need you to make an effort to leverage all funding sources and use cost engineering approaches to bring this down right away. And, maybe in some rare and infrequent circumstances, we may allow an elevated invoice, but if that's the case, we need to have, we really need to be convinced of a firm plan to bring it down in the future. So anyway, are there any questions on that? Yes, Leroy.
Good morning. You all are making this recommendation, or your demand, requiring us to reduce the average cost per unit. In your study, when you found out about this $13,345, what particularly in program operations did you find that was elevating the ACPU?
Leroy, this would be all program operations. The way DOE calculates it, it's going to be all program operations expenses. So that can be salaries for weatherization workers. It can be the space usage for your warehouse, your building. It could be the direct job cost. It's going to be a wide variety. That's not something we can pull from Hancock. That would be something you as a network would be able to provide in a more efficient manner for us. However, if we don't meet that ACPU level, if we don't meet the ACPU level by the end of the grant cycle, then the agencies that are elevated, you're going to be owing funds back. No one wants to owe funds back, but that would be the situation you're in. And as Tim said, the longer you wait to bring it down, the harder it's going to be. So we do have that exception in rare and infrequent circumstances. You can provide us a letter. So there could be circumstances where we can allow an invoice to go through, but you need to clearly outline it and provide that beforehand. But we're protecting you individually and as the network so that funds don't have to be returned.
I thank you for that. But what I was thinking that you all had actually looked at maybe some invoices from some agencies to determine what part of program operations was elevated in a fiscal standpoint. But if not, it's fine. I understand.
That's not something we can gather in an easy way. We can pull some of the data, but that would be provided easier from this individual subgrantees and for them to determine what's causing the issue on their end. But typically it's going to be, some of it's going to be the direct job cost, but you can see what your direct job costs are at the top of your invoice. So it's really going to be all of your other program operations expenses that factor into that.
Thank you, Michelle. Other questions? Okay. Well, thank you.
And then we did want to provide a Hancock Mint migration update. So we do have a twin Hancock user group of volunteers. We are evaluating the latest test build for minimum twin operational use. And for those that are those volunteered subgrantees, anticipate a invitation for a call this week. And that should be coming from Tim. We will be asking for a Hancock user list request. DHCD will be sending that out to each subgrantee, the current list of Hancock users within the organization and what the user role is assigned to those individuals. And if you notice that there are any that should no longer have access, to please let us know. We will be sending this out, I believe, probably this week, if not early next week, and we would request to have it back by mid-August, so August 15th. When there are departures within subgrantees, we try to make those changes and mark those individuals as inactive, but we just want to make sure, especially with the migration to the new software, that we have a current list of individuals that should be in there. And Stephen? Did you have a question?
Sorry, I was on mute. How do you want us to notify you about that? An email, or is that fine? Or
yes, we'll reach out. We've requested a list from Hancock just as so it could be pulled in a report. We're going to provide you with who we currently see and what the role is, and then you can acknowledge it via email. That would be fine.
Okay, thank you.
And for production units assigned in Hancock, typically this is going to be entered in for the projected units based off what we've put in your grant agreement. Once they're entered, they're kept there. But we are going to start assigning the unit amounts in Hancock and having those updated with budget adjustments so that you are aware of what units are needed to meet the ACPU based off the current allocation amounts within those budget categories. And Stephen, do you have another question?
I do. So you're going to start doing it, but you haven't as of now. Is that correct?
Initially, you have what's projected and what's in your grant agreement. However, with budget adjustments, if anything is moved into or out of program operations, it's going to impact your average cost per unit. For LIHEAP, it's more budget categories that impact it. But we're going to have those updated so you have more of a realistic number of what's there. Your completed jobs, again, as a reminder, they're only going to show as completed once all funding sources are invoiced, which includes the utility funding. So if your current completed jobs does not accurately reflect what you've completed, you would want to look to see what other funding sources are tied to the jobs that you've submitted.
Yeah, and like if we got an amendment and got more money,
we would add
that you would go in and change the jobs needed to be completed to keep your job average, correct?
Yes, just because we're going to be providing those numbers to you monthly as well. But since we've, as a network, but also nationally, how the ACP levels are beginning to be a little bit more difficult to be kept, we thought this might be helpful to see a more realistic number of where it should be at that time. So anytime you're in Hancock, you would be able to see what that projected or assigned unit, I think Hancock has it as assigned unit amounts. You would know what it is.
Yeah, good deal.
And then we're to our update of the scorecard. We have added another item in, which is going to be the targeted production count that I just mentioned. So you'll see that, and we may adjust how it looks as we go forward. So our network ACPU levels, you can see WRF 22 and WRF 23 and WRF 24 we're well under right now. DOE 24 we're under, but we do have funds that are still remaining, so we have to be mindful of where we are for those that have any balances. For both LAHEAP and IJA, we are elevated. LAHEAP actually went down since last month by just over 3,000, so that's good. We do want to keep that where it's not too elevated, but that is where we have some flexibility. For IJA, it did go up from last month by about $300. And then where we are for the health and safety percentage, again, this is based off of the health and safety amounts that have been invoiced in, so what have been spent versus the program operations amounts that are assigned to you. So these amounts do fluctuate based off when the invoices are submitted or there's any time there's a budget adjustment. And Megan, you had a question?
Yeah, sorry, thank you. Can you go back just one slide real quick? So for the health and safety for IJA, I know with the new DOE state plan, the health and safety plan has been updated. Will those same, and there's cost limitations in that health and safety plan, a lot of them are capped at like 1,000. I guess I'm just trying to understand, will IJA still be allowed to go over that 1,000? I guess I'm just trying to understand, how do we implement utilizing more health and safety with IJA with the inception of the new DOE state plan, where there are those limitations in the health and safety plan?
I think we have not updated our IJA state plan, but we still would want to be following what our current health and safety plan is. So that might be something we need to talk about more internally, just to make sure
Yeah, just,
we send a clear message.
like if there's an electrical repair in the new health and safety plan that's working on being approved, it's like if it's over 1,000, then it's a major repair. You can't use DOE funds. It's a deferral. So I guess I'm just wanting to make sure we all are on the same page of which health and safety plan we should be utilizing when it comes to IJA.
Yeah, I think we should assume that the DOE health and safety plan is the operating one right now.
Mhm.
If you know, I mean, if there's a one-off and we can't do that on DOE, maybe we can give an exception, talk to us on IJA if you have that kind of situation. We do recognize and spoke with our DOE project officer just Monday about the fact that our IJA plan has deviated from, what our working DOE annual plan is, and we're going to want to amend it probably in the next cycle. But with that said, I think across the board, it's best to assume that the DOE, the new DOE annual plan and policies for the 25 program year 25 is what we're going to be using as our template for IJA in the future. And that's in effect. I mean, technically, maybe we could grant a few exceptions, but for everyone's benefit, just for consistency, I prefer we just treat the annual plan for 25 and what we've discussed and what's going to be in place as the operating plan. So,
Okay, thank you.
that was some weasel words for the operating plan of 25 is it, and maybe on IJA. So,
Okay.
anyway, but ultimately we need them to align, and we plan to do that within a year.
And then for DOE 24, we do have a few subgrantees that have remaining balances. Again, as you see on the slides, these are updates for approved invoices through July 18th. So last Friday, we do have some invoices that are in the submitted status, but these would be for just those that have been approved. But we do have some balances remaining. You will see on the far right side 2 additional columns. We're going to be providing these with our monthly calls. You may see it appear a little bit different the next go round. But in the first lighter yellow column, you're going to see what's projected to stay within your allowable ACPU level, and that's based off what the total program operations amount is for that individual subgrantee allocation. For those that still have balances, it would be accounting for the program operations there as well as what's been invoiced. So this column right here is going to show you what is needed to meet the ACPU. The far right is going to show what is needed or remaining to be submitted in order to meet that ACPU level. So you'll see for the production units to date, we have 431 so far for DOE 24, but to stay within the ACPU level with the balances remaining, we need 451 units. So we have 20 more to do. There are some numbers, the ones that are in red, those are going to indicate that those subgrantees would need additional units in order to meet the ACPU level. If the number's in black or if it's a negative, then the ACPU level has been met, and no additional units would be needed in order to keep the ACPU level below or at that level. So a negative number in this instance would actually be a good number and mean that you're over by that amount of what was required. And so we have the 90 additional days through September. The grant agreements have gone out. I think we are on track so that we can spend these funds, but if there's at any point an agency is unable to, they need to notify DHCD immediately so that we can reallocate those funds. For DOE's readiness funds for 22, we are about to close that out. We have one remaining. For the WRF 23, we have a few remaining subgrantees with balances, and we did have the last few months we'd had some funds that had been given back from other subgrantees. We did have someone that took those funds on, and if someone is unable to spend any of their WRF funds, we did have a subgrantee that is requesting for an additional $50,000. So if you're unable to spend those funds, again, please let us know. We do have someone that's willing and wanting to request additional funds, but they would need the time to also have the production go through and be able to invoice by our deadline in early September. And then for the WRF 24, we do have a larger amount of balances that are remaining. So any of those balances remaining, you would have received an amendment. And you can see right now we still are doing well with our production. We just have 4 more units that really need to be met in order to keep our ACPU level. And then for LIHEAP, this is where you're going to see all the numbers go red on the right side because we are over our ACPU level. So just give you an idea of where as a network we are production-wise, what we actually need, and so what's remaining. We have a fairly large amount if we were to meet that ACPU level by the close of LIHEAP. And as a reminder, to please submit your spending plan or budget reduction to DHCD by this Friday. Stephanie, no, this does not include submitted. These would only be approved invoices for the month, not invoices that are in the submitted status. And the reason we put the approved is because if there are issues with the submitted invoice, there are going to be changes with it, so we're only reporting what's been approved.
And let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. On those invoices that's submitted, does that money come off of our budget before or after approved? Just because it's submitted don't mean the invoice amounts is took off of our budget or till it is approved.
And in Hancock, your budget balance is going to only show you the balance remaining that's not touching an invoice at all. So if it's on an open invoice where you're just starting out, you haven't finished it, but you're in the preparation, if it's submitted to DHCD, but pending review, or if it's in the approved status, all of those funds are going to be reduced out of your balance. On these tables, you're only going to have approved invoices taken off. So
But
you're going to see the balance for what only the approved invoices. If they're submitted invoices, you're not going to see that in the table. Does that help clarify?
a little bit, but so let me just to confirm. So if an invoice is open or submitted, it reduces the budget anyway, but it don't show up here, correct?
Correct. This is only, so say you have 150,000 it's showing for IJA as your balance right now, but you have 50,000 in submitted invoices. Here you're going to see, and like you would have heard Tim and us say in previous times, we only considered a completed job if it's been invoiced and we've had it approved. So for here, you're only going to see where it's been approved, and the remaining balance you could have submitted invoices. In Hancock, you would see 106,000 because the 50,000 is being reduced out so that you're not trying to create another invoice with those funds that are already assigned to another invoice.
Thank you.
And so for IJA, like LAHEAP, you can see all of the amounts are red. So every agency, in order to meet the ACPU and with your current balances, and everyone has a balance right now, what you would need in order to meet that ACPU level. And then for our IJA production monitoring goals, just update, we are at 1,105 units as of the approved invoices July 18th. We do need 1,442 units to meet that 30% goal of the full award. That is one of the benchmarks in order for us to have funds released to us for the final 32.8 million. And we are 76.6% towards the production goal of meeting that final 50%. And as we've stated before, our goal is to have these funds spent out and to have the production met by the end of March, so that when we have the new amendments go out for IJA, that hopefully we'd have new released funds to award out at that time, that we can meet these benchmarks. And then for our next monthly weatherization meeting, our August updates will take place during the interchange. It'll be at the first session on August 19th. And then Aaron, it's over to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Michelle. My name is Aaron Shoemaker, and I am the Housing Program Administrator at DHCD for the Weatherization Deferral Repair Funds, also known as WDR. Over the course of the next several slides, I will provide WDR updates / reminders, you're not supposed to say a comma, and briefly discuss data on WDR expenditures and remittances. Next slide, please. Reminder number 1, the 22, 23, and 24 grant agreements expired June 30, 2025. We're currently doing the CAMS cleanup for these to close them out in the system. So please disregard any dollar amounts that you may notice that are still remaining in these budgets, because we don't want, we have an internal process for working through that. Do not submit any new reports or remittances under those 3 years. All new reports and remittances for future projects should be submitted under the 24-26, the 2-year grant agreement. I think it's actually called 25-26 in CAMS. As a heads up, yeah, I already said that. Let's see. But yeah, we're still in the process of moving the funds over. I had gotten some questions about that. Reminder number 2, this is the same reminder that's been in the previous presentations, and that's just, we're still getting remittances and reports occasionally that use old versions of forms. So please just check the website to make sure that you're using the most recent versions of forms, which were last sent out along with the February 28, 2025 WDR program manual update. And yeah, the rest of the bullets are the things that I'm going to be covering on this presentation, including the WDR information notice, the program manual updates, with the comment draft, and then we'll go over the WDR score card. Next slide, please. This is the timeline for the comment period and final release of the WDR program manual. We emailed out the final draft for comments July 2nd. Comment period ends next Friday, August 1st. We have a tendency to get the majority of the feedback from the network during the last couple of days of the 30-day period. So we're not able to commit to a specific date for the release, as we will be including that feedback as applicable into the appendix in the program manual, as well as any changes that the network helps us work through. Having said that, your feedback is extremely helpful to us. Everything from catching typos to just improving clarity on sentence structure, but also helping us to clarify core features of the funding manual. Let's see, next slide, please. So with the release of the manual around the corner, I will go over some of the proposed changes. Most of these slides were things that I discussed last month during the presentation, but I'll go over some of them again because we did release the WDR information notice, and that has changes that were included in the manual. So this was an information notice for WDR that was effective immediately and sent out July 1st, 2025, that makes changes to the cost limits that we formerly called cost caps or regional cost limits. The changes were made based on discussion with the network, data that we looked at for the average job costs, and just also discussions with our internal finance staff on how to improve the program and improve the structure for remittances and reports to be processed more efficiently. So what are the cost limits? We have a $30,000 total job cost limit. It's for all the repair categories being funded by WTR. And there's a $15,000 repair type cost limit. So specifically, this means that there will be no more region-specific cost limits and no more category-specific cost limits. So that table that breaks out the different regions and the individual cost for each category is obsolete. There's also a cost limit on change orders, $5,000. So hypothetically speaking, if you have a job approved for $30,000 and there's a maximum cost limit that's being funded by WDR, the maximum cost that would be in the housing repairs on the remittance for a WDR job is $35,000. And again, that's just hypothetically if all the maximums are met. Cost limits will, how are we doing on time? Yeah, I'll Bill, I see you have your hand up. I think I'm gonna wait until the end of the presentation to address questions, just because we ran over last time because we addressed questions in the middle of it. But yes, we'll definitely get to your question. Cost limits may still be exceeded with the approval from DHCD. However, these are meant to be rare. I mean, we're really, as most of you probably have noticed over the course of the past few years, been emphasizing more stringency with the cost limits in alignment with our other funding streams to encourage grading. So, if you think it costs too much on your end, we are going to trust your judgment. But you're still welcome to reach out to me if you do have questions about these, and yeah, we do have language for justifying how to exceed them in the rare case that we do. Next slide, please. Multifamily jobs in the information notice require the submission of a signed funding plan that is meant to be a more firm commitment than for single family. And so this is basically going to be a more firm version of that preliminary funding plan that is already required for the WDR initial setup report. Multifamily jobs, similarly, there is a $5,000 limit on change orders. And again, I just want to emphasize, this is the information notice language that was sent out and is already in effect, but it's also going into the new manual. Slide next, please. On reports and remittances, please itemize the cost by repair type for DHCD review. Most of you already do this, but to say it more specifically, whether it's described in the scope of work on the application form and homeowner agreement or the contractor's estimate, when reviewing reports and remittances, we do need to be able to evaluate the repair cost by the category. For example, if we get a $30,000 job for roof, structural, and plumbing cost, we do need to be able to determine the dollar amounts for roof, structural, and plumbing costs individually. To that end, we are making modifications to the WDR initial setup report, specifically the required form, application form, and homeowner agreement is the title of the form. And I'll go over that more specifically in the next slide, please. So here are the three changes. I know describing them doesn't help as much as seeing it, but we have a screenshot on the next slide. But just to go over them really quickly, that scope of work text box that many of you have trouble fitting in the full scope of work, we are expanding that so that it's essentially half the page now, so that you're able to fit in the detail. It's okay if you still have more detail than fits into that, but we do think that it'll make the form better for some people. We removed that text box that said, for exceeding the $35,000 cost limit, provide justification here, because there's no longer a $35,000 cost limit. And also, as I've emphasized, we're not making exceeding the cost limits part of the regular operation of this program. We do want to emphasize the cost limit should be limits as much as possible. The biggest change to the form I'm going to discuss on the next slide, but that is that we are putting a table for breaking out the cost by the individual category. And we do want your feedback on this. So I put this on the next slide, please. So this is just a screenshot of that particular part of the form, just so you have an idea of what I'm talking about here more specifically. And then if you can think through how this would look for you implementing this for jobs, whether you ask a question on this presentation or give me feedback after the fact, it would be appreciated to get some feedback, because we want to make a form that is user friendly, but also accomplishes the goal that we're trying to have here, which is to be able to review those individual cost categories. So this is the table that has the requirement for breaking out the cost by category. Again, this is to help with review for expensive jobs to ensure that they're not exceeding cost limits. For lower cost jobs, this is not as, I don't want to say it's a totally moot point, but just to give an example how we're thinking about this being implemented. And if you have something that's over $15,000, it absolutely needs to have this fully detailed out. But if you had a lower cost job, like $5,000 with just a plumbing repair that's also, addressing like a deteriorated floor from the plumbing appliances, we're not necessarily going to have you break out the structural and plumbing for that, because, obviously if it's $5,000, it's not going over any cost limit. So you could just put all the plumber expenses in that one category, but if it is a higher price job, that's where we do need to see this broken out. Next slide. All right, so that was the application form and homeowner agreement, and we're going to be sending that out as soon as we feel confident with the final draft of that, so stay tuned. But back to the program manual language itself, it's upcoming is we're modifying the language to state that WDR repairs are explicitly listed in the manual. Currently, we have language that enables DHCD to approve repairs outside the listed categories. And, you know, basically from feedback from the network and our internal staff have called for more prescriptiveness about this, some more clarity about what costs are and are not allowed. So, excuse me. This includes maintaining the 6 main categories that are already in the manual, and we've been trying to make sure that we're capturing all the expenses that WDR has been allowed, that some of them haven't been listed in the manual explicitly, like sump pump, for example. And then also we have that other category that we have explicitly listed costs for that as well. Some changes to the language around crossover projects, as we refer to them. We are clarifying that crossover projects no longer can be done specifically just for ACPU relief. Like that can't be the only reason for the request. The manual currently does not state that. It's for specifically for ACPU relief, but we realized that there's a need for better clarity on this. We've gotten a lot of reports that state that as the deferral reason. The language that we have in the draft reads, eligible repairs include any energy conservation / savings measure with an SIR less than 1, and health and safety measures after DOE and IJA health and safety funds have been exhausted. So that's the language that's in the comment draft that we have sent out. So, you know, please, you know, make it a point to review that for clarity and ask any questions that you have about that when you're going through the manual draft. All right, so those so far this is you know, it's not dozens and dozens of changes that we're making to the manual. So hopefully it'll be a quicker review for you, but we do encourage you, of course, to read through the entire document. And even if it's something that we haven't changed, if you have questions about it or suggestions, we're happy to hear them. Your feedback is very, very useful and necessary. Next slide. All right, let's go over the scorecard. This section's a bit shorter than it's been in previous presentations because we closed out 2022, 2023, and 2024. This chart does not yet have those dollar amounts in them in the particular cells because we're still doing the internal process with CAMs. Yeah, and I'm not going to go into this in excruciating detail, and it will be in the presentation that's going to be sent out as we do every month. So if you want to look at this more closely, Michelle will be sending out sooner than later. And yeah, so these are the balances for the 14 sub-grantees on the current contract. So right now it stands at $15.2 million remaining, 80.5%. Again, those numbers will fluctuate once we reallocate the funds from the previous grant agreement. Next slide, please. And this slide has data based on the submitted remittances for WDR. Currently, the network has served over 2,200 homes in Virginia, which just crossed that line, with over 1,200 single-family homes and 925 multifamily units. The average remittance for WDR, specifically for single family, is pretty consistent with last year, 21,000-ish. And then the bottom chart shows the repair types associated with the remittances for these jobs and this data has stayed fairly consistent over the past, I would say, 2.5 to 3 years, with over half the jobs having roof and HVAC repairs funded by WDR. Very interesting. As an exclamation. Very interesting. This concludes the WDR program update. Thank you for listening. And let me take a look at chat to see if we have any questions. Bill, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Just two quick things, I think. The breakdown in the operations manual as far as what requires prior approval versus what is sort of an FYI, the 2000 line separation, that won't change, correct?
This is for the $2,000 for change orders.
Yeah.
Yes, that we have not made a change to the change order language as it relates to this. It's just to clarify what Bill's referring to. If there's a change order on a WDR measure that's over greater than or equal to $2,000, then it requires a new initial setup report so that we can fully review the changes. Change orders that are under $2,000, we can usually work through those via email, depending on, if there's a new subcontractor or a new measure type, then we will need an initial setup report.
Right. And the other quick question, a multifamily, you said it has the same $5,000 change order cap. That's total project?
That's the idea currently. The idea with multifamily jobs is that we typically work through them on a case-by-case basis, right? We only have, I think, 2 or 3 sub-grantees that submit them. And with the level of planning that goes into multifamily jobs, we find that it's a bit more intensive and detailed. So the expectation is, that basically there's a commitment up front of the dollar amounts that are going into this job with WDR and other funding streams.
Yeah, what wasn't questioning, just clarification. Thanks.
Sure. All right, let me scroll through the chat here. Does that include, Stephanie, you have a question. Does that include invoices that have been submitted? Oh, wait, that's before me. That's not for me. All right, Cheryl, good morning, Mr. Sanders. Oh, okay. That's that question. I don't need to read this out loud, do I? Mr. Childress, you said, I don't see the new form under DHCD WDR. So the form that we discussed in this presentation, the WDR application form and homeowner agreement, that has not been submitted yet. So just want to make that clear. This is a proposed change. Those 3 changes that I listed out, including the table that I showed. So it hasn't been sent out, and we're not going to send it out until we have the final draft. And then once we have the final draft, we're also going to put it on the website. So as of currently, if you're submitting a new job today, initial setup report, use the one that's on the website now. Reagan asked, for the category cost breakdowns, do you need just the repair total or the material and labor broken out as well? So good question. The way that we've structured that form is, we've always required upfront the material and labor costs total for the entire WDR dollar amount. So that the way that we put it in that table is that it's combined, and that's because that the purpose of that table is to review the cost limit to ensure that it's under the total 15,000 for both materials and labor. Depending on how we release the form, you could fill out that form by putting in both the materials and labor. It's not a spreadsheet. It's going to be a text box. Do you have any more questions?
It looks like Megan raised her hand.
I unraised it. I answered my own question.
Alrighty, well, that's it for me.
Yeah, I just interject here on the cost limits. I mean, one of the things to realize is yeah, we're basically saying for WDR funding, the cap is 15. But if you have, let's suppose you have a $40,000 roof. In theory, I think 13 out of 14 of you are EHARP providers. You could use 10,000 from EHARP, 15,000 from WRF, and 15,000 from WDR to accomplish that. If you have exhausted WRF and EHARP, in theory, you could use up to 30,000 for that roof. Okay, I mean those are some of the dynamics that we're looking at with this funding plan. And as Aaron showed in the average cost per job, I think an overall cap of 30,000 for the total job is well within what has been within the averages of the network. So and feedback from a number of you all. We have been discussing this with everybody for some time, and so we're trying to make this more prescriptive. The new form takes away some of the justification language for exceeding, because we're not going to do that. But it just requests that you have a little more clarity on the cost per project type. And we've seen a number of forms be submitted in the past that says, well, this is the project, and there was a table there, and it said, multiple categories. Well, we do need you to break out the multiple categories now. I mean, that's I think the one change that we're asking for. So, David, you want to add to that?
Yes, I'm along that same line about being more prescriptive. I heard some questions and some concerns about the cost caps that are built into our health and safety plan. Because we heard the network in saying that they wanted more prescriptive, more line in the sand on the health and safety plan, is why we put those cost caps in there. And we also gave a comment period for the health and safety plan before we actually submitted it to DOE. So that was us also trying to make the line in the sand and the more prescriptive when to use WRF, when to use WDR funds, and when they are eligible for a deferral. So along those same lines.
Mr. Childress, you have a question. RFP required for over $10,000. If in the event that you are pursuing exceeding the WDR cost limits, so it's $15,000 for the individual repair type, and then 30 for the total job. So one of the requirements in that in that event is 3 requests for bids. We understand that some of you live in or work with clients who live in areas that there isn't necessarily an abundance of contractors, so that's why it's structured as requests rather than the actual bids. Does that clarify? All right. Well, with that, thank you for your questions. Do we have any other closing remarks?
So we appreciate everyone joining. We look forward to seeing all of you that are able to attend the interchange next month. If you have any questions between now and then, of course, you can always reach our staff via email or by phone. And we enjoy talking with you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.